Let's talk about why I quit medicine and why I chose consulting as my next step. If you don't know where I am, you can look behind me. I don't think this is a very monumental place to be recording, but it just seemed like the quietest place, even though it's like a Saturday morning. Lots of people have their dogs out and stuff like that. But this is gonna be a very boring, simple video, no B-roll, just me talking, maybe some people behind me taking wedding photos and stuff like that during the video. But I wanna talk about a couple of things. I wanna talk about how I feel a year after leaving medicine, the different options that were actually available to me and how I found those options, why I chose consulting in the end, and what my life is like now living in New York City, living as a consultant, and what my plans are for the future. So if you're up for me talking with really no fanciness other than this, that's the end. There is no more fanciness. That's all the fanciness you're gonna see. Buckle in for maybe 30 minutes to an hour. I'll try and keep it short to tell you the story of what happened. So my background up until now, I was a biomedical engineer in undergrad. I spent 2 years doing the courses I needed to get into medical school. I spent 4 years going to medical school in Philadelphia. I spent 1 year as an internal medicine resident in Boston. And now I have moved to New York City where I'm practicing as a management consultant. But let's back up a little bit. So even before medical school, I feel like I always had this itch of kind of wanting to do something different. And I think that's where this channel came from, and I think that's where leaving medicine came from. And maybe it's why I am a huge weirdo. But I always thought this thing, whatever this thing was, would be something that is combined with medicine. So maybe I would do it while I was practicing as an attending. Maybe I would do this thing after 10 or 20 years practicing as an attending. I never in my wildest dreams thought I would go through 10 years of trying and figuring out just to leave. So before medical school, I had a lot of these contacts in these different areas like pharma, consulting, VC, all these kind of things. But here's the best part, about 80% of that stuff went completely over my head. I had no idea really what was going on in those things. And the first 2 months of probably practicing as a doctor was agony. But it wasn't agony because of what you were doing, like the patients, the colleagues, everything like that was great. The real agony came from, I guess, my mind being in some kind of disarray, not really knowing what was going to come next. Clinical medicine wasn't where my curiosity was. It wasn't where my drive was. It wasn't where my ambitions were. And this kind of pushed me down into a deep, dark hole of, I guess I just have to be the person that clocks in, clocks out, does what I need to help people, and then kind of just lives a life like this. I knew this wasn't right. I knew for some reason this wasn't the correct path. And I also knew that if I don't have a plan, if I don't know what I'm actually going to be doing next, it stresses me out immensely, like crazy so. And this is something I need to work on. Anyway, you can watch the other video about this. I talk about this really in depth in my other video, but at the end of those 2 months, I finally decided that at the end of this time, at the end of this year of internal medicine, I was going to leave. And I thought I would feel really sad and kind of depressed making this decision, but it felt so much better. It was like a weight came off my shoulders because for me, when I make a decision, it's magical because then I can start to align everything I do, my tactics, my habits, my life, everything around just this decision. So the decision now was I'm leaving medicine. So it became, what am I going to do next? I had something I could follow now that I was leaving. I had a plan. Bam. Everything was sorted. Everything was great. Counter bam. This unearths a whole new world of things, right? Because if I'm not going to practice medicine, what the heck am I going to do? So keep in mind, this is 2 months into internal medicine residency. I figured out that I'm going to leave. And now I actually have to figure out what the heck I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And this is hard because in medicine and every medical school, everything is laid out for you. You know you're going to go to undergrad. You know you're going to take the pre-med courses. And you know after that, you're going to go to medical school. You're going to have residency. You're going to have an attending job. Of course, it's hard, right, when you're actually there, but in the grand scheme of things, in the life organization, in the risk category, it's actually pretty easy because you know what's going to happen, you know what the output is going to be, and you know there's really not much risk. You're going to have this salary, you're going to have this job, and of course that's what's appealing to many people, but it also I think is somewhat of a trap. It's very easy for a lot of medical students and people in these long careers, lawyers, accountants, everything like this, to follow on this same path, to follow on this autopilot, because it's the thing that's set out by people and it's a relatively risk-free path. But in reality, if you think about it just one step beyond, it's not really risk-free, right? Because what's the risk? So the risk is essentially that you do this thing that everyone says is the right thing, that it's correct, but you go through 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and you realize all of a sudden that this thing actually isn't your thing. Sure, it's maybe all these people that are going along this path, but it's really not your thing. And I think this is a major error and a major fallacy that not enough people think about, right? Because we're all different. We all have unique personalities, skills, talents, neuronal connections in our brain. Our muscles are wired differently. We have different heart rates, all these kind of things. And those differences are great. We shouldn't all be the same. If we're all the same, we would all drive one way on a highway. We would all eat the same food for dinner every night. We would all have the same job. And the world would slow down immensely. I'm guessing even the humanity's genetic pool would disappear. Differences in nature is what makes us all so strong, what makes us all so resilient, and what makes us unique and the ability to have these unique impacts on the world. And this is a big statement, right? But this is a thing I thought about in those first 2 months, because I thought, okay, I'm not really contributing that much to medicine. Sure, maybe I'll be a good enough doctor, I'll do good things, but am I really taking it to that top 1%, that top 1% of the top 1%? And not selfishly, right, because I want to be the best and, change the world. Sure, I do, and I think I've had my ego checked a little bit since that last video I posted, right? But the paradox is, when you're so selfish, you're unselfish. And this is the paradox I think I realized when I know that the best things I've ever done, that when I'm the top 1% of the 1%, is when I'm doing something insanely selfish. Like that is recording these YouTube videos and doing these YouTube things. This is different. Not many people do it, and it's a risk, right? But I do it because I feel like something inside me says, this is the good stuff, right? This is the fun stuff. Parts of medicine were like that. Parts of traveling around the world, parts of business interactions, they're like that, right? But it's much harder to see these things and do these things and try these things, right? If you're on the path that's set by someone else, that is the normal, safe thing to do. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Maybe you are that person that is uniquely set up, that is uniquely talented to have these different interactions, to do these different things. But the biggest mistake that can happen, right? The biggest, I think, mistake that I was making is I was doing these things because other people thought it was the thing I was meant to be doing. And then what happens is I was in the median, I was in the middle, and I wasn't aggressively contributing to the world. I wasn't taking the unique things that have been instilled in me through my genetics, my experience, my interests, and things like that, and actually making the biggest impact on the world. I wasn't using all my resources properly. So I don't want to talk about other people. I just want to talk about me. That was a lot, but that was a lot of what came into the decision beyond the impact and happiness that came before. Okay, so let's back up again and let's talk about actually what am I going to do next then? If we know that there's all these kind of things that I want to do, how do I actually decide what the next thing that I want to do in my life is? And this was really, really hard. So the first thing I did is, luckily, through YouTube and through medical school, undergrad, some jobs I did, I had a lot of different people I was speaking to. And the easiest thing to do was just call them up and say, what are you up to? What is your life? What is this job you're doing? Why are you doing it? What made you leave medicine? And I found out very quickly that there's a lot of people that actually do this. There's a lot of people that take a step away from the normal path and do something completely different. And the first conversation I had was with someone who took the standard path of, medicine, medical school, all these kind of things. And, but he actually decided from the very beginning, right, this amazing person, that he wasn't going to do residency. He wasn't going to do the standard path. And he decided in his third year of medical school, right, that he was just going to leave immediately for a consulting company. This was absolutely insane. How do you not go to residency? Isn't the whole point of people going to medical school going into residency? But then if you look at some of these statistics around these MD, MBA programs, especially at Stanford, at Wharton, places like this, the statistics are insane, right? I can't remember them off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure that it's something ridiculous, like 70 or 80% of Stanford MD, MBA students never go into residency, and Wharton might be something around 30, 40%, and it just was mind-blowing to me. An even more mind-blowing thing is that when I had this discussion with these advisors, these teachers, these things like that at the school I went to, they didn't mention it, and they in fact, I'm not going to say any names, right, but they in fact lied to me about what the next possibilities and steps could be. I spoke to an advisor one day. I remember walking into her office, and I was a scared, unsure medical student, and I said to her, what is this industry thing? What is consulting? What is venture capital? What are all these things? We've never had a lecture on this. We've never spoken to anyone in class about this. The standard thing is to go to residency. And she said, you hear about this, but it's not really true. Absolutely no one from I'm not going to say the school, but you can figure it out. Absolutely no one from this medical school doesn't go on to residency. Every single person goes on to residency, and they don't do anything in industry. And I said, okay, so it's like a media thing, it's an outlier, it's not something that people do. But then I started having these conversations that we talk about. And I found out that she actually lied to me. There was 4, 5, maybe 2-3% of the class, of my class, that actually didn't go on to residency. They actually did something else. And why did she do this? Well, maybe she actually didn't know, which is fine. But I think in a lot of these things, you have to look where the incentive lies. And the incentive is to show and tell people, right, that we match such a good rate to residency, all our students graduate because then we're a better medical school, we do things, blah, 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 blah. And this kind of hit me in a weird way. I said, what? I can't believe that these people would lie to me. I can't believe that these people are actually doing these different things that I had no idea about. And medical students, nurses, anyone, any healthcare professional, anyone in a professional school, lawyers even, I'm sure there are no conversations on entrepreneurship, industry, and how to actually leave to enter these things. Sure, maybe there's some kind of digital technology or creating your own research study or trying your own project, right? But this is always on the side. This is never the thing you can do. You'll never not go to residency. And I saw this in a lot of the comments on my first year or on when I left medicine, right? A lot of the people were saying, Zach, you took away a spot from someone. You are awful. How could you not possibly do this? You're selling out. All these kind of things. Maybe there's some truth to it, but I think a lot of it actually comes from not understanding. And I was there, right? I didn't understand all these different possibilities, all the different things you can do, but these people not understanding the way these things actually work, right? A lot of people hate insurance companies, right? And there's some good reasons for that, but a lot of them don't actually understand what goes on in the insurance companies. They don't understand how these things work and what are driving the people that actually work there, right? Also, consulting companies, investing companies, all these kind of things, a lot of people really don't understand it and they take things on the superficial level. And I like to think, right, that this is only a 1% of a 1% of people that have this dramatic reaction. For example, if I leave residency, right, that's a doctor that doesn't exist. We have a shortage of doctors, right? When that's not true. It's really not true at all, because that spot will be immediately filled up by someone who didn't get in the year before or someone who wanted to transfer programs. So it's not kind of I am taking away a spot from someone else. It's someone else will get in. It's just kind of through these roundabout ways because it's so competitive and so many people want to do it. But anyway, back to this first conversation with this first person who did consulting and knew he was going to do consulting when he went away. Well, he was starting a family, he was having a kid, and he decided that, this was the best path for him and his family to take. And he didn't want to spend that many hours in the hospital. He wanted to contribute to the world, to patients, to innovations in this different way. And I just didn't know this was a way to do it. And so he quickly connected me with, 17 to 20 other people. Because when you have a conversation with one person here, they'll connect you with 2 or 3 people, and then very quickly that number exponentially grows, and you're talking to like hundreds of people. And very quickly I had about 900 different conversations, 1,000 new LinkedIn conversations, and so many questions about how did I not know this other world, this other place kind of existed in the medicine, biotech, whatever sphere. And through this research, through these conversations, I had many groundbreaking things, right? I always used to think that the biggest impact I could make on real living people is being a doctor, right? That's what you do. You diagnose them, you give them medication, and this is the thing that actually fixes people and helps people the most. But two realizations really put it into place for me. Keep in mind, I already decided I was going to leave medicine. Number one is you can affect people and help people without actually physically touching them or talking to them. And number two, money isn't necessarily evil. It actually drives the majority, right, of these innovations, research, inventions, and medical things that go on to change the world for patients and people. HIV was transformed from a death sentence into a truly manageable condition, right, after investments from these investment companies. Hepatitis C was actually cured, and these drugs and life-saving interventions may never actually even have existed if it wasn't for these investments, this capital, to allow these studies to be run, to allow these trials to be made. And consulting companies have a lot of these same interactions, right? They help drive inventing new vaccines, they help decrease wait times at hospitals, decrease medical errors. All these things are improving and saving patient lives. And one of my mentors to this day actually created a medical education company, right? And this medical education company helps treat patients more effectively and with less hours, right? And helps students learn better and be happier and spend less time studying and more time actually interacting with people and patients. And in fact, the majority of these innovations and inventions and things not only come out of America, but number two, come out of these people that aren't actually practicing clinical medicine. And again, I don't want to poo-poo clinical medicine at all. There's an intangible thing that happens when you have a great doctor interacting with a patient that can dramatically change that interaction and dramatically change the life of both of the people involved. But I had no idea that all these things in the background were happening that let HIV become a manageable condition, that let hepatitis C be cured, that launched some of the biggest innovations in the world. Now, of course, this is only the positive. There are lots of counter arguments, and there are lots of bad actors in every single one of these industries. But that's the point, really, right? There are bad actors in every single one of these industries. There are bad actors in the hospital. There are bad actors in volunteer charity organizations. There are bad actors everywhere, right? I just think it's very easy for the media and news organizations to kind of label and attack these things. And it's also much more profitable for a lot of these places and companies and things like this, right, to create a polarizing stance. Again, I went over this ages ago, right? But the polarizing stance comes from saying, if I get more viewers, more people clicking these things, right, then more people are going to go to the advertisements, I make more money, and it's just this positive feedback loop. Let's get into the meat of the video, and maybe I'll put somewhere in the front that you can skip to this part if you actually want to get to the meat instead of the philosophical stuff. So after all these conversations, I realized there were about 4 or 5 major options that I could do, right? So option number one is venture capital. And what venture capital is saying, okay, I'm going to pick this earlier stage company. I'm going to invest in it, wherever, however much money, in the hopes that the company does well, and then you can sell it at a later point, right? And this isn't your money, right? This is people or investors or other people that are saying, okay, we're going to give you all this money because we think you're great investors, and we're going to let you use that money in a certain way. And there's a management fee of managing this money, and then there's also basically the success profit, right? So the idea is that you trust these investors, these people at this venture capital firm so much to make these decisions in a certain field that when they actually make these investments, they're going to make more than the regular people, more than the regular market of maybe like 8 to 10%. So next there is consulting. And consulting is a difficult thing to explain because there are so many different options that you can do. You could really work with any company in the entire world and solve any problem for them in the entire world. So it's hard to explain, and it's why there's so many memes around it. But one example might be something like you are working with a hospital to see if you can reduce wait times before patients see the doctor. The next option is startups. So startups is when you work at kind of a very small firm. You probably have a lot of different roles, and it's very, very risky, right? So the thing could blow up, but also with the huge risk comes the huge upside, right? So if you have equity in the company and it does well, maybe it will explode and you'll do really well otherwise. Now this could be something like maybe you're finding or inventing a new drug to treat glaucoma, Or maybe you found a medical device that can stop seizures with an implant in the brain. And then of course you have the huge swath of these bigger or more normal companies. So these are things like Pfizer, Google, Walmart, and all these companies are doing is doing something that they're very good at, a product or service, and kind of working on that main thing. So instead of working with other companies, working with other people, working with other clients, it's mainly working on the one thing that is your niche, that is your area of expertise. Again, I was trying to figure out a couple things, right? Number one, would these people actually want me to work there? And if they wanted me to work there, what skills or qualifications or things would I need to have or know in order to work there? What is the timeline to get there? And so around this time, and I actually made a video about this, I had narrowed it down to really 3 things. Number 1 was kind of a bigger consulting company. Number 2 was more of a startup, medium stage company. And number 3 was kind of doing my own thing. But I realized that selecting one of these things makes it much more difficult to do other things. So for example, if I pick one thing, it might decrease my optionality or set me on a very narrow career path once again, almost like medicine, that's hard to switch from. For example, if I decided to do my own thing, right, for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, it would be kind of difficult to enter into Google or Walmart or one of these bigger companies because they'd be like, what have you been doing for the past 3, 4, or 5 years? But the other thing I had to think about, right, was finances. So if I stayed a doctor, that would be another 6 to 8 years of kind of training, making okay money, decent money, but working a lot for that money. And then eventually after those 6 to 8 years, I would make quite good money. But these other jobs offered me fairly good returns or fairly good money fairly quickly, with opportunities to advance in these levels of money to crazy amounts within maybe 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years. However, again, I want to speak more to my situation, that I'm in a very, very lucky situation, right? My family paid for all of my education. I have no debt or anything like that. And YouTube and my book and some of these other things has helped me out immensely. So I don't really have many financial concerns, if any. Comparatively, right, to a lot of people in the world, right, I'm really lucky. I'm extremely lucky. So what I want to do is try and use these advantages the best I can to kind of make my impact on the world and help the world, while also doing things that are interesting and exciting to me. Hi, doggy. Hi. And I talked about this before, right? But the paradox is that actually these selfish things for me are really quite unselfish, right? Because when I'm doing the selfish things, I find that the things I do actually help more people in a better way than the unselfish thing of maybe staying as a doctor or working in these classical jobs. And this isn't unique to me, right? I'm not inventing these principles. This is something that Steve Jobs says, Naval Ravikant says, Paul Graham says, and it's all about finding that unique curiosity. There's dogs going crazy around me. Finding these kind of unique things that kind of position you better than other people, what feels like play to you, but work to others. And then when I hopefully find this thing, right, because I'm so interested in it, because I excel to levels that maybe few other people can excel in, I'm also providing that much more of an impact, that 1% of an impact, of a value add to other people. So anyway, I'm in this extremely lucky position, and what I think about all the time is what can I do that I like that also adds value to the world? And this is a very difficult question, right? This is probably one of the hardest questions, if not my hardest question of my entire life, right? What can I do that I'm interested in that also adds value to the world? But if I already had the answer, and this is why I left medicine, right? Because I knew this wasn't what I was interested in. I knew this wasn't what I liked doing. How can I speed up this process? How can I find this thing? Well, I just have to try a bunch of new things that I think might be interesting, and that's one of the reasons, if not the main reason, I went into consulting. And finally, the third part of this Venn diagram of, I guess, this life decision of what you're gonna do, right, is how much time, how much ability are you gonna have to actually live a life outside of work? And in medicine, in certain investing firms, in certain consulting firms, right, a lot of this time is spent working, and you just really have no time, or it feels like no time to do like your own stuff. So in the end, that Venn diagram is what made the decision. It was based on financials, curiosity, and kind of living a normal life outside of the job. So consulting, the financials are great. The curiosity was the best, which is the reason I picked it. And then the time outside of the ability to have a life outside of it were like medium, but that was the rest of them too anyway. And all this information came from, contexts and people that I spoke to that were in the consulting field already. So they were doing amazing work, they were excited by the things they were doing, and they told me great and exciting stories about what they were doing next. And I felt consulting would not only teach me the most, but give me the most optionality, the most ability to kind of change and do different things, especially when I'm in such a clueless state of actually what I want to do next. I would learn about business, be exposed to medical technology, pharmaceuticals, private equity firms, hospital systems. I could look into energy and mining and insurance if I wanted to, philanthropy, really anything I could think about, I could have a try or job or experience in. Okay, I had a lot more planned to talk about in this video about kind of how I actually got into consulting, but I realized that this video is going super duper long, and what I actually want to do is maybe make another video if people are interested in on how like actually I got into consulting and the actual process of doing it. So after about a year of struggle and turmoil and trying to figure out this thing out, I actually got an offer at the top choice firm in New York City, and that's why I'm here. So let's talk about how life is now and what I'm planning to do next. So my feelings about New York City were always somewhat lukewarm, I guess. I visited a couple times, I thought it was interesting, but I never really thought that I wanted to live here. It seemed like too city. I feel like I love suburbs, I love the green space. You can see that's why I'm recording out here right now. And it just seemed a little bit too kind of imposing for me. But the other side of it, a lot of the reasons people say it's such an amazing place is, you know, it's one of the centers, if not the center of the world, right? You have connection, exposure, all these kind of things. You could do anything with anyone and get anything that you want in the entire world in this place. If someone wants to meet you and you say you're in New York City, it makes sense and they will come to you. So those thoughts really haven't changed that much, honestly, now that I'm here. There are amazing things, but I feel like the past month, I've been working at the job and living in New York City now for the past month, feel a little bit just like overwhelming. And maybe it's the new city, maybe it's the new job, but because I've just been a doctor for so long, because I've just had this chill life for the past 6 months before this of just like writing a book, traveling to Hawaii, like all these kind of things. But this, what I'm doing right now, it feels like a lot. And I'm hoping it's gonna change in the next maybe 3 to 5 months, because if it doesn't, I'll have to reevaluate. And I think the job is actually really interesting and exciting, but the combination of a very, very busy job, you know, working, I'd say probably on average, you know, 12 to 15 hours a day. That's only Monday to Friday, so I have the weekends off. But in combination and being with such like a busy city, it kind of seems like a disconnect for me, because the optimal thing here would be like, okay, I have a good support system, good family, friends, and stuff like that. And I work a good amount, right? Because that's what's interesting and exciting to me. But I have all this time to actually explore and take advantage of this amazing city, which I'm living in. But it doesn't really feel like that right now. Again, maybe this is a good thing, right? I think doing this hard work and going through these struggles, like they're not tearing me down so much, and I'm learning so many things. I'm being exposed to so many different people. So right now I feel like it's the right path, just maybe not in the right city. Okay, overall, long video, crazy video, but I think the most helpful things for me, right, was number one, having conversations with lots and lots of people. Number two, not following the path that you think is the right path because it's what everyone else is doing. That is not good, and the sunk cost fallacy will get you, and it'll get you hard here. Number three, when you start to evaluate these options, don't just evaluate the work and don't just evaluate what other people are saying. Try them for yourselves and really think critically about what you want to do and what you want to accomplish, instead of just going with kind of, this is what I should do. The should is one of the most dangerous words that you can ever have when you're trying to figure out what to do. Number four, and this is what I'm doing right now all the time, is just try to hunt for that curiosity, that genuine thing that excites you. Because the paradox is, again, or at least the paradox is with me, when you find the thing that's genuinely exciting, you'll commit that time to be that 1% of 1%, and therefore, as long as you're not like stealing from people or hurting people, you're gonna have that 1% impact and value add to the world. Anyway, that is it. This was a hugely long video. If anyone has any advice, any thoughts, I love to read all the comments. I'm still reading through the comments from the Why I Left Medicine video. But thank you so much for watching. Really, thank you so much for supporting me. And I'm excited to keep sharing this. And I will see you on the next one.